For those of you tuning in from Aotearoa, New Zealand, I wanted to say Manawatia a Matariki. I hope you had a beautiful long weekend and took a moment to look up into the sky. And for those based in Australia, I wanted to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. We pay respect to their elders past and present, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples here today. I am very excited today to welcome Anna Taylor from Very Special Kids for a conversation on change management. In this space, obviously, we could have invited along somebody who is change management's their whole job and they're an expert in that. But I thought, who better to invite along than someone who's in the thick of it to discuss their learning so far. And Anna is currently rolling out Rosterfy, which is, a big project for her. And she is a dedicated and results-driven nonprofit leader with a wealth of experience managing high-impact volunteer programs across major Australian healthcare and community institutions. Currently, she serves as the Manager of Volunteer Services at Very Special Kids, a premier Australian nonprofit and the home of Victoria's only children's hospice. So welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Kelsey. It's my pleasure.
Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we kick off. There is, you'll see in the top right-hand side, a comments box. Please fire your questions through as we go. I've got so much content to get through with Anna, so many questions to ask her, but we will prioritize your questions as well and leave a little bit of space at the end to answer them. I also did want to do a bit of an apology for all the different emails going out. We have obviously 2 time zones on here, and we were just fiddling a little bit with the technology, making sure that everyone's getting the right timing. So I can see that you all made it on okay. We'll iron those out for the next one. And just quickly before we kick things off, for those of you who aren't aware of Rosterfy, we are an Australian-founded volunteer management system supporting organisations to put the power of automation at the heart of their volunteer programs, helping you to save time, ensure your compliance, and focus on what matters most, your volunteers and your community. And here is a little glimpse into some of the global and local volunteer programs that we support. But so much to get through. And so to set the scene, Anna, the reason really I invited you along is because you were kind enough to invite me along to one of your volunteer recognition evenings just recently. And you chose at that night where you were honouring, the work that your volunteers do for you and all of the achievements of your top sort of most passionate volunteers, you chose to bring them into the fold a little bit and introduce Rosterfy and the project you were working on and why you were rolling out some technology. And I was so in awe of the way that you did that evening and the response from your volunteers, because a lot of your volunteers, as I'm sure many of those on the call can relate to, were in that older demographic. In fact, many of them were 70 plus. And watching you speak really passionately about that, the why and the reasons behind changing the way that you've previously done things, and therefore changing the way that they may volunteer in some ways, how it resonated with them and the positive response you received. And it really got me thinking about how that technology adoption just does improve so dramatically when volunteers understand that why. So hence I invited you along. And I wanted to start by asking you, before selecting Rosterfy, what were the challenges that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey, and thank you for your kindness. That was very lovely of you to say. We had a great night at our appreciation event, and yes, I was certainly surprised too by the buy-in from a lot of our volunteers, particularly of our older demographic. Look, when we first started looking at a volunteer management system, we were still operating across a number of spreadsheets, a very old database that was not designed specifically for the growing nature of volunteer programs. And I think at our last recruitment prior to bringing in Rosterfy, we worked across nearly 21 different platforms to make sure that worked. And of course, there are things that I worry about when working across so many platforms, is the data integrity. Losing through all the busyness of maintaining all of that, losing that direct connection with our current volunteer team when so much time is dedicated to recruiting and onboarding new volunteers, getting to know them and making that process seamless. It was very clear to me that with our shifting nature of our workload, we weren't continuing to have a seamless transition for our volunteers to experience. And I worried about their experience and their journey. And so we wanted to make sure that we were creating or looking for a platform that would ease that heavy administration burden so we could do what we need to do best, which was really engage our volunteers, make sure they're well supported, make sure they're compliant, and make sure that their training is current so they can do the beautiful work they do.
Absolutely. And many organizations say when they're at this stage, because I speak to so many every day that feel that same pain that you are feeling, where you're like, this isn't working. We need to do things better. We need to scale. But there's this resistance to our volunteers won't use technology. And so in your experience, is that actually true? Or is it more about how that change is introduced, do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I also think it's the approach. 5 or 6, maybe 8 years ago, I would have said I think it would be very, very difficult to get the buy-in from maybe some of our older demographic. I think that's changed a little bit. I think COVID certainly helped with a lot of people to continue to engage in community, had to get very good at online. But since that time, I think there's a lot of fear around data integrity and scams, et cetera, et cetera. So our volunteers, I've found, have really adopted the idea of a one-stop shop, I suppose, for all of our information and where their information is held, and so that they have a little bit more control over it and less worry about what's being emailed and their safety around clicking on links and things in technology as well. So talking to a lot of our volunteers, they actually see it that we are safeguarding them a little bit more as well. I have to admit, we've got some other volunteers that have just gone, oh no, this is too much. This is too much for me. And we will work with them one-on-one. And if they don't want to engage, we're not going to force it. We will support that small section and do a lot of the work for them.
Amazing. Yeah. And I was doing my own research into some of these thoughts, and I read a paper actually, and the outcome of that was really around how the challenge with older volunteers isn't often that they can't actually learn technology. It's that sometimes organizations implement technology in ways that don't respect how they volunteer, and so therefore their digital confidence isn't where it needs to be. So they've got, rather than actually the chronological age, it's actually the fear of breaking something or feeling embarrassed to ask for help and not feeling capable. And so that adoption in older adults more identifies around like the perceived complexity and confidence and that support as barriers, rather than actually just the fact that they're just in an older demographic.
That's right. Absolutely.
Volunteers give their time freely. And so how do you think that should change the way that an organization should approach change management compared to introducing new systems for paid staff?
Oh, that's a good one. I work on the philosophy or the theory that we don't trade, the commodity that we trade with volunteers is not financial as it is with staff. It's around value for time offered. And we want to really respect that time and the time that they offer us. So if we can streamline what they need to do for compliance measures in one system and really easily with that one-stop shop, it's actually quite an honouring of their time, instead of create a password and a log on for the online learning portal and then for this and then for that and then for the other. So bringing that all together where they can find everything they need in one place really honours that safeguarding and safekeeping of their time. We do have a lot of younger demographic volunteers who will be all over it really, really easily, but who also built really beautiful relationships with our other volunteer members. And we're looking at bringing some of those on to help with some of the training with our other volunteers that are not so happy with technology as well. We've got additional devices that they can work on here for training, but it really is about honouring the fact that they're offering us that time, that we're recognising that time that they will be doing in training with our volunteer hours, and also giving them other recognitions through the system, badges for meeting training compliance, and celebrations when they meet certain levels of understanding around the system. So it's more, again, showing them that we honour their time by giving our time to create something that will create community.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about how you're using some of your volunteers as volunteer leaders to support others that might be a bit challenged a bit more, because there is research to show that peer champion model actually outperforms maybe your traditional trainers in-house, because maybe there's less embarrassment there's more trust, there's more patience. And so actually deliberately like recruiting digital champions from within your existing volunteer group can be really helpful in getting that buy-in from the wider group.
Yes, we're always looking for ways to cross-pollinate our teams as well, to create that beautiful sense of community and support.
Yeah, and what a great way to feel like for some of your younger demographic as well that might not have been around for so long, but to make them feel like they're doing something additional and sort of give them a bit more responsibility and therefore a bit more buy-in to your cause and really feel valued. I think that's a really beautiful way of doing it.
Absolutely.
And I think this leads really nicely into the whole bringing volunteers on a journey. So how early do you think volunteers should be involved in the change management process?
We let them know before we'd settled on a particular product, and let them know that we were looking at various different platforms so that we can streamline their journey. We didn't have them involved in the decision making of which platform to go with. However, we've been keeping them updated from the beginning and getting a lot of anecdotal feedback on what they would like to see and what they think would be of great benefit. We've involved some volunteers in the testing of the product as we were rolling out the first phases, which has been really fantastic. Some of our volunteers that have been here for a really long time have found that it's updated their knowledge and they've really enjoyed the process. And we also got some people that weren't associated with the organisation to come on with testers as well to ensure that the training that we have built and the journey that we have offered has given them a really good understanding of what our organisation does, just to make sure that we weren't missing something that we take for granted because we know the information. So having that dual purpose as early as possible has been fantastic. And we've given updates in our monthly newsletters about how the project has been going over time. And I think that's created a little bit of fear for some of our volunteers, but mainly it's really brought to the front the amount of time and effort that we are putting into building something that is going to create a heightened experience for the volunteers. And they're really excited to see what we've been working on.
Beautiful. And I think that also was really reflected in that night that I was able to actually witness how you were talking to your volunteers and really bringing them on the journey. And often it's really good to think about how the fact that long-term volunteers that might come across as a little bit more stubborn in terms of change, they're not often resisting the technology. They're protecting the culture, right?
Yes.
Because they care so much about your mission and also their own community that they've created within there. They don't want to feel like, I suppose, the organization doesn't value how they've done things previously, or anyone's, it's becoming too corporate, or the personal touch is disappearing. And I think you did such a fantastic job that night of saying, your example, I don't know if it was how many systems, if it was 14 or more, you're like, hey, actually, we're currently managing 14 systems. With this, we can bring it down to 2 or 1. And that gives us way more time to actually listen to your feedback and to spend time with you and to grow our program and make it even better. And just even hearing, like watching you say that to them and seeing their responses of, oh, okay, we're on this journey. This is the reasons behind. I immediately just saw the barriers of like, oh, what's this, kind of wash away, and a lot more receptiveness to what you were saying. I thought it was really beautifully done.
Thank you. And I think one of the important factors is I don't know everything. Hard to believe, but I don't know everything, and I don't know how we're going to manage some elements of the system, and I don't pretend that I don't know. And so we braced our volunteers by saying, and they asked lots of questions, will it be able to do this? And will you be able to do that? And like, I don't know, let's learn together. And it's that piece where we need you to tell us what's working and what's not working, because this is for you. Primarily it is for improve the experience and improve community. So we need to hear from you, and having that really open, transparent conversation is bringing back some fabulous ideas, Some of them I'm not
Yeah.
sure if we can actually manage, but we'll certainly look to do that over time. So it was exciting, and we've been gaining that over time through our newsletters and our personal conversations that we've been having.
Yeah, beautiful. And on that, I suppose, how are you balancing introducing more automation while still maintaining that personal human volunteer experience? So you have mentioned, is this maybe more for the new volunteers coming through? Because obviously they've maybe got less touch points from you if there's a bit of automation, but potentially more meaningful touch points is what I'm sort of hearing from.
Yeah, look, keeping all of the automations that are built into the system, the automated emails that go out when they've shift reminders, and your working with children check needs to be renewed, keeping them in a consistent voice that sounds like us, and not just you need to renew this, you need to do this, get it done. We're keeping it very gentle in the way that we have always communicated. And in every single email there is, if you're having any trouble, please reach out to us. We are here to help. And making sure that we're touching base with volunteers in between to firstly make sure they're enjoying the experience, gaining their feedback, and just ring up and saying, I haven't spoken to you for a while. So it gives us more time to have that personal connection with the speed of automating or digitising our journey. Actually alleviates time to have more touch points.
And obviously you're still in the early phases of your Rosterfy rollout, but how are you finding that automation so far? Are you already seeing the time, like taking the time back for your team? What's that looking like?
Look, it's so fast. It's faster than what we can work at the moment. Look, it's fantastic. We're devoting a huge amount of time in getting it right. We have rolled out phase 1, so we're recruiting and onboarding volunteers through the system now. We have migrated all of our current data across, and some elements of the system is live to the volunteers. And we are hoping to go live very soon. We're just refining our training and some of the little processes. We still need to have a few snags we're fixing, but we'll be going live with the rest of the volunteer team over the next 4 to 6 weeks. But they're already... We're finding that the speed in which things happens is allowing us to really get people on board so much faster than we ever have before. We opted to move some face-to-face training to online modules as well that we've embedded in the learning centre, which means volunteers can, from their moment of interest to finalising their training journey with all the compliance checks in the middle, it can be as little as a week to 10 days. Which currently or previously was up to 3 months. So it has automated our system and moved us through the processes so much quicker that we can now concentrate a little bit more on other projects and developing more roles that we know that our volunteers will find really valuable and will support the organisation.
Amazing. Gosh, 3 months down to a week. That's even than I thought it would be. We have heard that across different organizations as well, and it just shows potentially how much that your team was previously doing all of that, right? So it must just give so much more room for your team to now be able to say, okay, well, where do we want to go with our program? How do we want to improve it for volunteers? And are you finding that you've still been able to strike that balance where obviously the processes are so much more efficient for the administrators? Has it created any extra work or friction for volunteers, or are you finding so far that that's also still smooth, or it's reduced friction? What's that been like?
I think in the early stages, it's probably added just a little bit of friction if things haven't gone as smoothly as we expected. And we've learned we need to put some troubleshooting things together, which we have done, and we've sort of watched where the hiccups have been, and we'll be able to create something very quickly for volunteers to follow, and it's streamlined that process really quickly. At this point, all of the feedback has been very favourable for our new onboarding volunteers, which is very exciting. Some of the volunteers that we've sneak peeked the system have been testing for us are amazed at the efficiencies that have been brought in for them as well as for us. And we've been able to manage that in our workload quite well. One of the things that we're really excited about is that it's reduced the load of a targeted and group recruitment system and onboarding, which took us away from the journey of our current volunteers to really reducing that load so that our workflow can remain consistent and seamless. And that has been a huge impact on the journey of our current volunteers.
And I think what you mentioned before as well about the key learnings through the change management process, I think introducing new systems, there's always going to be learnings. There's always going to be things. It's never going to go 100% completely smooth from the beginning because you're learning about your program and you're also condensing so many systems into one. But I think what's great about a one-stop shop is now you actually have those insights into what's not working. And you can clearly see in the system, okay, here we're hiccuping here and here. How can we fix that? And often that can be a really hard part about using different spreadsheets or having different people manage different things and not having that one oversight of everything to actually know where the hiccups are and to actually know where volunteers are stumbling, especially if you've got up to 3 months for onboarding time. Like how much enthusiasm are you churning volunteers because it's taking too long? And I've been on the other side of that, having been a volunteer for a long time and going through quite a rigorous compliance and onboarding, where you're almost like, gosh, this is really hard. This is really hard. I don't know where everything is. How do I find it all? And so just being able to actually have everything in one place can be really helpful. And then from your end, being able to actually see where everything is and where volunteers are having challenges.
Correct. And I couldn't tell you how easy it is now to have all of that information compiled. It's really been a journey for us as a staff team to look at our workflow, manage our workflow, but also have available to the volunteers everything that they should have available to them. We have looked at every single process. We have looked at every element of the volunteer journey and have looked at whether we need to reshape this, improve this, or is our current practice still valid within the digital system. And I have to say that what we've embarked on has been nothing short of transformational in our work processes as well.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And so what do you think is a piece of advice or a mindset shift you would leave organizations with if they're preparing to embark on their own volunteer technology transformation? Big question for you, Anna.
That is a big question. Look, I think ownership, providing our opportunity for volunteers to have ownership over certain elements of the process and gaining their feedback and their buy-in has been the biggest, I think, challenge. A lot of people I know are a little bit fearful of opening the floodgates up to too much feedback because it's a little bit hard to coordinate and you're not going to be able to meet the criteria for everybody's thoughts. But I suppose my biggest mind shift is don't start with the software. Start with the experience you want the volunteers to have. Talk to the volunteers and find out what the experience is that they find most meaningful and work backwards from that point and find the technology that's going to support that journey. We invested as much time in developing that change management as we do the implementation. In fact, it probably sits a little bit higher in the implementation. And bring the volunteers on the journey. You don't need to provide them something that's complete and finished. Bring them along on the journey, give them little bits of ownership and buy-in. One of the things that seems to have worked beautifully with our team is for them to highlight to us through feedback where they think the little mistakes are. And it's even in grammatical mistakes in the content. We've written all the content ourselves, we've built our own training, and there is reflections of that. And their little buy-in is that they're helping us improve the system and they've helped us in finding the tweaks. So I think, again, don't start with the software, start with the experience.
Yeah, and I think a really key part of this that's come out for me in terms of this change management piece is really that you've managed to recruit, in a way, volunteer champions or ambassadors by getting their buy-in, by getting their feedback, by being open to, for them to grumble at you a little bit and say, this isn't working, this isn't what I want, and really taking them on the journey of the fact that you're actually doing this for them. You want them to have a better experience. You want to have more time to pour back into them because their work is so meaningful and they mean so much, and you know there's a better way to do things, and so you're adding to the culture and you're adding to the experience, and you're doing that alongside of them and for them. And that's really what was reflected in that volunteer night. And yeah, I mean, I know you're only partway through your Rosterfy implementation, but I am just so excited to see how it continues. And such great feedback so far. There was a couple of questions we had come through. I know we've got someone with their hand up as well. Oh, we've got two. So hi Anna. How did you go about identifying volunteer leaders to champion and support the implementation of Rosterfy? Did you reach out to specific volunteers or ask volunteers to put their hand up if they were interested?
So it's a little bit of both. We did approach a couple of volunteers that do a lot of administrative work with us. We know their professional background with business analytics. And so we chose a few volunteers that we knew would manage the system relatively okay. And give us some feedback from one perspective. And we also approached another small set of volunteers that we knew had varying technical skills and wanted to get them to test the system from their various different levels of understanding. So we didn't put it out to the whole team. We have hundreds and it would have been a little bit difficult to navigate. But we also found once we started putting the information in our newsletters, they came to us asking to help.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And for the ones that didn't adopt the technology or you just know that they're not going to, how are you planning on managing those ones?
One of the really lovely things about Rosterfy is that we can go in and support the volunteers and do some of the work for them. So the trickier, more technical aspects we'll do on their behalf with their consent, obviously. And they don't need to change too much about what they're doing now. They can communicate with us in the same way and we'll manage it with them as best we can. And as they build some confidence, we hope that they might take on a little bit more of the journey once they see how easy it is and what's involved in the community. So at this point, we have a few tablets that we'll set up and we'll take them through it and only expect them to engage at their comfort level.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a really key thing to know about Rosterfy. I think sometimes people think that the system is either everybody has to use it in the exact same way. Actually, Rosterfy is super configurable, and majority of our organizations do have a handful of volunteers that just don't want to touch, or they don't have, you know, maybe they don't want to take a phone around with them, or they don't want to have to access it. And there's lots of different ways around that. Whether you're impersonating the volunteer, whether you've got them on rolling shifts, you can make it very hands-off for the volunteers that need it to be. And then for those ones that, you know, the younger demographic coming through, or the ones that just are keen to lean in and see how a new system works, we can make it cater for them in the best way possible as well. So that's a really great bit of feedback there too. Any last questions? We've got 2 minutes left. These sessions always go way too fast, especially when you've got someone brilliant like Anna on the call with so much knowledge here. We've got one from Vanessa. Do you have your volunteers apply for their own shifts, or do you put them in for them? How did you approach this, and how was this received?
It's a little bit of both. We have different levels of rostering. We have very consistent volunteers who we've just assigned the shifts that they normally do. So that made it very, very simple. But we have other volunteers who like to see where the gaps are and jump in. We also run events. So we have a lot of volunteers sign up for events, and then we confirm the volunteers that we would think would best suit that particular event. So it's a little bit of both. And we're just navigating it team by team as we need to.
Yeah. So if we're speaking about Rosterfy specifically, that's very configurable depending on the role, the event, etc. You can change it up for everyone. Yeah, awesome. Okay. We're coming to the last minute or so. So thank you so much, Anna. It has been such a pleasure to have you on here sharing all about how your process is going. As I said, I found that volunteer appreciation night just so inspirational. I already think the work that you do is so important and so beautiful. So it was such a special night to be a part of. It was very inspiring. If anyone else has any questions for Anna, feel free to email them. I've also got the QR code up here on the screen if you'd like to get in touch, or if you've got anyone you'd like to hear from on our webinar. We've also have our volunteer health program check if you'd like to complete that as well. We've got a webinar coming up around that shortly as well, sharing some of those insights from others that have completed that check. But otherwise, I wanted to say, mā te wā, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along today and sharing your lunch break with us if you're in Aotearoa, or otherwise your mid-morning if you're in Australia. And we very much hope to see you again on our next session. Thank you again, Anna, and goodbye, everybody.